Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for the Life Sciences Investor Forum. Our next presentation of the day is from Lipella Pharmaceuticals. Please note you may submit questions for the presenters in the box to the left of the slides, and you can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Jonathan Kaufman. He's the Chief Executive Officer, and Michael Chancellor, he's the Chief Medical Officer of Lipella Pharmaceuticals, which trades on the OTCID market under the symbol LIPO. Welcome, Jonathan and Michael.
Thank you, John, so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today to present our company to the investors, as well as we're going to present our phase 2A clinical trial results. My name is Jonathan Kaufman. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Lipella Pharmaceuticals, and I'm also joined today by Michael Chancellor, our Chief Medical Officer. I'd like to start by describing what is unique about Lipella Pharmaceuticals, and that is our proprietary liposomal formulations and our ability to differentiate ourselves by our ability to deliver active agents to mucosal tissue. Delivering drugs to mucosal tissue is not easy. Topical formulations are typically optimized for skin, which is a much different barrier. We use proprietary multilamellar liposomal technology that permits local fusion of large liposomes directly to mucosal tissue. By limiting the distribution of the drug to the active site, we are able to achieve high concentrations at the site of interest with minimal systemic exposure. This minimal systemic exposure can avoid many systemic issues, and that's a major formulation advantage. For example, as we'll see later in the presentation, our product for oral lichen planus has the potential to spare patients from systemic corticosteroids, and this is meaningful to both clinicians and payers. Our formulation strategy is consistent with our regulatory strategy, which is to work on serious conditions that have no adequate treatment options, and to utilize the 505(b)(2) regulatory pathway for efficient clinical development. Since we use agents that are already familiar to the FDA, we're able to move quickly into phase 2 clinical trials, especially given that we have in-house CMC. Our strategy involves advantages in efficacy, safety, and speed. We take advantage of well-known mechanisms of action, increasing the probability of efficacy and safety, and our strategy has led to the following asset pipeline. We currently have 2 assets in phase 2, a third asset which is IND approved, and a fourth asset which is preclinical. All of our assets are liposomal formulations of active agents, and all of our assets are intended to be delivered directly to the mucosal tissue of body cavities. Our 3 most advanced assets, variations of LP10, are formulations of tacrolimus, a potent immunosuppressant, and specifically an inhibitor of T-cell activation. Our preclinical asset is a liposomal formulation intended for intravesical delivery of a PD-1 inhibitor. Our most advanced asset, LP10 oral rinse, also referred to as LP310, is intended to be indicated for oral lichen planus, a T-cell mediated autoimmune disorder, which I will describe in more detail on our next slide. Oral lichen planus is a T-cell mediated autoimmune disorder where the body's own immune system causes inflammatory lesions inside the mouth. Women are affected more than men. These lesions can be painful and sensitive. Patients report that it can hurt to eat, speak, and in some cases even breathe. These lesions also have significant malignant transformation rate, causing cancers of the oral mucosa. It's important to note that there are no approved drug therapies for oral lichen planus. This indication thus fits our strategy of pursuing indications that are serious with no approved therapy. OLP affects up to 2% of US adults, translating into a 2025 population of approximately 5.2 million, with approximately 3.9 million experiencing symptoms. Now I'd like to address the current treatment options. The first line of therapy for OLP patients are topical creams and gels that have been approved for skin indications. These formulations are generally not well tolerated in the mouth. Patients report difficulty with retention in the oral cavity, issues with swallowing, and that it's difficult to apply. Approximately 40% of diagnosed and symptomatic OLP patients are refractory to treatment. Local corticosteroid creams, when applied to the oral mucosa, can burn, cause thinning of the oral mucosa, and immunosuppression in the oral cavity. The second line of therapy includes systemic corticosteroids and immunosuppressants, and this solution is used sparingly due to potential systemic toxicity. We estimate that approximately 40% of diagnosed OLP cases are not well controlled. This presents significant unmet demand for new product that would be well received by both clinicians and payers. We intend to address this unmet demand with LP10 Oral Rinse, our proprietary liposomal formulation of tacrolimus. The following slides will provide more detail on this lead asset, including formulation details, clinical trial results, and finally market economics, after which we can break and answer questions you may have. Let's start with the formulation details. Tacrolimus is a potent immunosuppressant. The drug is so successful, virtually all transplant patients are on it. Transplanted organs are attacked by the body's immune system, and the main player in autoimmunity is the T cell. T cells are normally inactive, but when they encounter a host cell invaded by a foreign antigen, they activate. Their activation is mediated by a release of calcium into the cytoplasm. When tacrolimus gets inside of a latent T cell, it basically shuts off its ability to be activated, and it's the activated T cells that are responsible for most all of the tissue damage in OLP. Tacrolimus can be difficult to formulate because it's highly hydrophobic, meaning it does not dissolve in water. Tacrolimus skin ointments are often thus oil-based, making them difficult to apply to the wet surface of the oral mucosa. Our oral rinse formulation of tacrolimus is aqueous, having liposomal tacrolimus suspended within. The liposomes in our formulation are different from liposomes in typical IV formulations. Our liposomes are large, multilamellar, and metastable. Our liposomal technology supporting LP10 is patented through 2035. We have tested our oral rinse with a rinse period of 3 minutes and found very low whole blood levels of tacrolimus. This bodes well for the safety profile of our product and is a key parameter of differentiation. This slide shows blood level concentrations over time after administration of tacrolimus by IV in the blue, oral tablets in the red, topical ointment in the orange, and the dotted green line is the blood level concentration over time for the LP10 oral rinse. Notice that the topical ointment is less bioavailable than the IV and oral tablet formulations, but there's still significant systemic uptake, whereas our liposomal oral rinse shows a lack of systemic absorption. This is a consequence of our tacrolimus liposomes adhering to the oral mucosa instead of sliding off. Even with this low systemic absorption, we found significant signals of efficacy, and this demonstrates the potency of the drug at the active site. These results are part of our phase 2A clinical trial. So I'd like to now turn the presentation over to our Chief Medical Officer, Michael Chancellor.
Thanks, John. Next slide, please. So I'm very excited to share with you the final results from our phase 2A trial. This is a multi-center dose escalation center study across 7 U.S. sites. These were adult men and women with symptomatic oral lichen planus, and the treatment involved twice a day, 10 ml of LP10 for 3 minutes, and the duration, the primary endpoints for 4 weeks. The primary objective is safety and tolerability. This is the first in human trial. And secondary are the efficacy. Not only the physicians, the investigators' notation of the mouth ulcers and erythema, but also patient-reported symptoms and quality of life. So on the bottom is the demographic of the patient in this study. It's dose escalation, so there's 3 groups, 0.25 milligram, 0.5, and 1 milligram of tacrolimus in the LP10. So total is 27 subjects. Now, this really reflects the typical population of OLP. The median age, 62 years old. It's more women than men, but we had about 80% women and about 20% men. And this is a chronic inflammatory disease, and the average duration that the patient is suffering with it and continue to suffer with it is 7 years. Next. So a quick overview, multi-center study, 27 subjects, dose escalation at the 3 doses that I noted in adult men and women. And the study site ranged from California to Massachusetts down to Florida. So the drug is sort of similar to the mouth rinse, Listerine you have. It comes in a week supply of bottle, sort of like the medicine, liquid medicine for children. And twice a day, you withdrew out 10 ml, put it in a cup, and rinse it in your mouth and spit it out. So there's 3 phases to the study. The first is the screening run-in phase. Make sure they have OLP, informed consent. And during the treatment phase, the first dose was done in the investigator's office, and whereby the PK whole blood test was done. It's 3 minutes, twice a day. Then they're given weekly supply of the medicine that they take with the log. And the follow-up is at 1 week, and then at the primary finished line at 4 weeks. And there's a follow-up phase where they were seen 2 weeks later, so 2 weeks off of LP10. Next. Now, most people is not familiar with how oral lictin is measured. And it's really 2 approaches, and we use the parameters. The top, the dark blue, is the clinicians, the doctor, dermatologist, and the oral medicine doctor have 2 validated outcome measurements that they use to score, they examine the mouth. The first is the Investigator Global Assessment, IGA. It's rated from 0 to 4 on the number of ulcers, the size of ulcer, and how much erythema it is. So 0 is clear, 4 is severe. So only patient with 3 and 4, moderate to severe OLP are included. And similarly, there's another REU score that's a difference, records also similar, the amount of white lines, plaque in the mouth, erythema, and ulceration, also validated scores. So we have 2 scores that the investigators report at each time point compared to baseline. But just as important as FDA require is, does it improve the patient? So we have 2 10-centimeter visual analog scale that the patient will self-report on 0, none, 10, worst imaginable, on pain and sensitivity in their mouth before and after treatment. There's a validated OLP symptom severity measure, OLP SSM, that asks over the last 24 hours, is it not bother you or maximally bother you when you talk? When you eat, when you brush your teeth, a validated questionnaire. And finally, the global response assessment on a score of 0, meaning, hey, I got much worse with treatment, to 6, I'm markedly improved with treatment. This was done at the 4-week time point. Next. Key inclusion and exclusion. So the study included moderate to severe OLP because they had to have an IGA score of 3 or greater. They have to have a pain or sensitivity of at least a 3 on a 10-centimeter log. There's no evidence by the investigators or history of oral cancer. And the key exclusion is that since this is the first study of tacrolimus as a rinse, we excluded patient who's failed previous tacrolimus. And if somebody's on steroid and still is bothered, they have to be willing to undergo a 4-week washout period and stay off of steroid for the duration of the study. Next. So primary is the safety, and here's what the safety I'd like to share with you. So if you look at the rightmost column, this is what we had with the study with the 27 subjects. This table reported adverse events over 5% incidence. And just for historical reference, this is what's noted with the oral and topical tacrolimus that's been FDA approved. So this was a safe study. There was no serious adverse events or discontinued related adverse event. So what are the side effects reported? Well, there's 18.5% of dry mouth and 11.1% of oral dysesthesia or abnormal tingling sensation in the mouth. But what we did not have, so the key finding is it was with the no serious adverse event and there was minimal systemic absorption. And John noted that the tacrolimus whole blood test, so we can measure if tacrolimus is absorbed, that it was undetectable in 76% of the subjects, and all of the treatment emergent adverse event was mild to moderate. So the AE, as a clinician of special interest, that we never had a patient that had a whole blood tacrolimus level greater than 15 nanogram per ml. That would be potentially concern for systemic safety, because tacrolimus, a high blood level, could be toxic because it causes an arterial constriction. So we had no patient that developed blood pressure during treatment over 145 systolic, 95 diastolic. That would indicate an arterial constriction. And we had no alterations, diminishment in renal function, which is the main systemic side effect of systemic tacrol. And moreover, there was no intractable pain. So we had over 1,500 dosages, twice a day, 3-minute rinse, and it was tolerated. And we had no allergic reaction during the trial. Next. So, we're interested in the efficacy. So the two figures here are the investigators reported, the validated IgA and the RUU. Now let's look at the left side, the dark blue, the IgA score. Now 0, 1, 4, 6 meaning baseline, 1 week, the last day of treatment at week 4, and 2 weeks after the final treatment, week 6. So the IgA is a 0 to 4 score, with the 3 being moderate and 4 severe. So the baseline, and you can see the lines of the 3 groups. Baseline is about a 3.5, and there was improvement statistically meaningful at week 1, and reached to about more than 2 at 4 weeks, and it still has efficacy 2 weeks after final treatment at week 6. And this matches the RUU score, the other symptom score, where there's an improvement by 1 week with treatment. You get the improvement, maximal efficacy at week 4, and sustained improvement at week 6. Next. So just as important, it's not just what the investigators, doctors saw, but what about the patients? This is patient reported on a scale of 0 to 10 on the pain in the mouth and sensitivity in the mouth. And you can see that both was pretty close. It was about 7 at baseline, and there was a significant 4-point drops by week 4. But within week 1, you see the improvement in pain and sensitivity, and there's remained efficacy 2 weeks after the final dose. Next. This is the symptom severity score, OLP SSM, and is asked over the last 24 hours, how terrible was it? Was your OLP from none to terrible, severe when you brush your teeth, when you're eating, when you're smiling, and when you're talking? And you can see also similar to the other parameters, there was improvement in the symptom severity to the patients at week 1, maximally at week 4, and still improved by week 6. Next. And the final figure that I'll show you, this is the patient asked at week 4 when they had their last dose, their GRA, the global response. And it goes from 0, I'm very much worse, 3 is no change, and 6 is very much better. So no participant out of 27 reported that they got worse, and really every participant noticed some improvement with across the dose group. Most was reported moderate to much improved. Next. And I'd like to finish up with my slide, just sharing you with few of the comments from investigators and their site, and 3 of the participants in the study, that the study was positive. In fact, 3 of the patients who are failed conventional steroid rinse in the mouth that participate in the study improved, requested that their doctor help them get the medicine with compassionate use, and the doctors did, and they were granted expanded use access by the FDA, which is only granted for a serious disease when there's no viable alternative treatment, and they're doing well during the expanded use after they finish the trial. Next. So now I'll turn it back to John. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. I'd like to now describe the market economics of LP10 for OLP. This slide illustrates anticipated market size and segmentation, starting with projected OLP prevalence of approximately 2% of the US population, then funneling down to an estimate of the predicted addressable patient population of 1.2 million patients in the US. These are symptomatic patients that are poorly controlled by existing options. This estimate is based on primary market research, including interviews with 15 healthcare providers, including oral surgeons, dermatologists, rheumatologists, ENTs, dentists, as well as 5 payers. This is a substantial untapped market, and we anticipate the potential for significant penetration of this market, as shown on our next slide that describes the anticipated utilization. The healthcare providers and payers described multiple unmet needs. There's no approved therapy for OLP. It's currently treated by off-label use of topical gels and creams that are unsuitable for the oral cavity. Topical steroids have limited efficacy, compliance challenges, and concerns with long-term exposure. Topical calcineurin inhibitors are difficult to apply and cause stinging and burning, which reduces compliance. Systemic immunosuppressants have safety monitoring requirements, insurance reimbursement challenges, and are not practical for milder patients. And off-label biologics have cost and access issues and have limited clinical evidence in OLP. LP10 would be the first FDA-approved drug for this indication. Our minimal systemic absorption, which we believe is one of our key differentiating factors, will be an important market driver. Unlike existing off-label options, LP10 is well tolerated and easy to use. Let's next take a look at pricing. Pricing benchmarks include off-label use of Vtama and Opzelura creams, currently reimbursed at $1,500 and $2,000 per patient per month, respectively. And then Otezla, which is an oral systemic therapy at $5,000 per month, which is too expensive for off-label use, and patients only have access to samples. Payers view LP10 as a convenient, de-risked alternative for patients who fail topical steroids. The familiar mechanism of action reduces uncertainty, and the liposomal delivery is perceived to add value by improving local retention while limiting systemic exposure. Payers cite $1,000 as the most reasonable benchmark for LP10 per patient monthly wholesale acquisition cost. While the monthly price is expected to be around $1,000, payers anticipate intermittent use, with approximately 3 to 5 cycles per year, translating into an annual treatment cost per patient of $3,000 to $5,000. LP10 is thus projected to generate approximately $750 million in peak sales in 2035, driven by its first-to-market status and improved delivery of a familiar molecule. These sales projections translate into a $350 million risk-adjusted net present value for this asset alone. And this completes our review of LP10 oral rinse for OLP. Obviously, we're bullish on the future potential of this asset, and we're actively seeking industry partnership in the next phase of development, which will be a placebo-controlled clinical trial. To briefly summarize the main points of today's presentation, we began with what makes us unique, and that's our proprietary liposomal formulations optimized for the delivery of active agents to the mucosal tissue of body cavities. We emphasized our corporate strategy, leveraging our formulation IP to develop products using the 505(b)(2) regulatory pathway, which accelerates clinical development and reduces efficacy and safety risks. We've described our asset pipeline consisting of 2 phase 2 assets, an additional asset that's IND approved, and a 4th preclinical asset, all of which are liposomal formulations optimized for the delivery of drugs directly to the surface of mucosal tissue. We then described our lead indication, oral lichen planus, and described the challenges patients have with the current standard of care. We're also happy to have the opportunity today to present the positive results of our recently completed phase 2A clinical trial evaluating the safety and efficacy of LP10 oral rinse in refractory OLP patients. And then we've also presented primary market research, including interviews with a broad range of healthcare providers and payers, indicating a significant untapped market opportunity. And we hope that you find our story to be compelling, and we look forward to now taking your questions. And there are a few. And first question is, can you discuss your capital position, your needs to support LP10 through phase 3 and commercial launch? The capital position right now, we reported between $1 and $2 million of cash in our last quarterly statement, and we anticipate approximately $20 million required to bring LP10 oral rinse to commercialization. How large is the addressable global patient population for OLP? We anticipate that the global market is approximately 25% of the US market in dollar terms. However, OLP is not race specific, it's a little bit gender specific, but it's experienced all over the world, and we have patent protection in multiple jurisdictions. Okay, I'm looking for the next question we can take. What regulatory milestones are you expecting over the next 18 months? And the next regulatory milestone would be IND approval of the phase 2B placebo-controlled clinical trial. And then this is a question for our Chief Medical Officer, Michael Chancellor. Based on phase 2A data, what patient-reported outcomes, for example, pain and the global response metrics, stand out versus historical controls?
Yeah, thanks, John. There's no historical control because there's no drug approved for oral lichen planus. But with our very experienced groups of investigators, was able to talk with them before, during, and after the trial, and they were surprised, very pleasantly surprised, that first, a medicine put in the mouth for a painful mouth condition doesn't cause any burning. The patient can tolerate it. They were very surprised that the patient can see the improvement on the very first office visit. So that the historical control is lacking, but there are validated pathway scores that we can discuss with the FDA to be the primary efficacy endpoint for the phase 2b trial. I think the most historic important issue is that the patient, after the finishing the trial, spontaneously seeked out the process and getting approval by the FDA for expanded use access. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And we've reached our 30-minute point, and so I think we have to break now. So I'll turn the presentation back over to the moderators. But before I do that, I just want to thank everybody for who's on the call and who's listening to this afterwards. We appreciate your interest in Lipella Pharmaceuticals.